boundaries are hot, right? Like they really are.
Yeah.
And if I want to be able to set boundaries in a long-term relationship with someone, I need to be able to do it early on in dating. Avoidant attachment is kind of the opposite of anxious attachment. This is someone who learned hyper independence as a coping skill. And they can oftentimes overvalue themselves and devalue others. Do you have any of those friends that are like, there's just nobody good enough out there? Nobody meets my standards. Avoidant attachment, a lot of times what happened is childhood neglect. They didn't have a parent that was attuned to their needs. They simply learned to shut off their emotional selves. I always talk about relationships have a culture, just like any company has a culture. Every relationship has a culture. So you want the standards, the norms, the boundaries to begin to be built from day one. I think so many of us, we don't tune in. We don't have self-trust. We haven't even tuned in. So we don't even know what we need.
The Big Silence, empowering personal experiences, inspiring compassion, and healing lives. We are no longer silent. We are here.
The Big Silence. The Big Silence.
All right. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Morgan Anderson, all the way from Yellowstone land in Bozeman, Montana.
Yes, you got it. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, we were just chatting about Montana and how Bobby and I might just have to go out there and do your podcast. Let's get vulnerable.
Hey, do it. Bring your dogs. Come hang out. I love it.
We're going to park it up in Bozeman. All right. So Dr. Morgan Anderson is a licensed clinical psychologist, relationship coach, leading attachment theory expert, and author of Love Magnet. I am so excited about this conversation. But first, before we dive into all of that, why did you choose your profession? What guided you there?
Oh, I love that question. Even I remember being 5 years old and just being so curious about people's stories.
Mm-hmm.
I was the kid on the playground. I would just sit with one other kid and I would just get to know them in depth, one-on-one. I was always empathic and curious about people. And I also know that my own experience of losing my mom, I was 6 years old, and going through that, I just became fascinated about how do people heal and make it through hard things.
Mm-hmm.
So I really, by the time I was in middle school, I remember being in 6th grade, I had decided I'm going to be a psychologist. This is the field for me. I knew at a really, really young age.
Yeah. So at 6 years old and losing a parent, like, how did you cope and work through that and heal from that and the grief?
Yeah. And the full story there is really complex grief because my mom actually had an allergic reaction that left her in a vegetative state.
Wow.
So I lost her as my parent and as the mom that I knew, but she was still in a physical body for 20 years after that.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the grief was very complex. And I can tell you that when she passed away when I was 26, that was when I actually started to really go through both grieving periods of the 6-year-old me and the 26-year-old me. And just like any grief, it's you realize that hole will always be there.
Mm-hmm.
That person you'll always grieve. Them not being there, my sister's wedding, my sister having kids and thinking of what my mom would have been like as a grandmother.
Yeah.
You know, it never goes away, but how you relate to it changes.
That reminds me of what you say, like, because you said your mom, passed away when you were 6 years old, but then she was there till 26. But it's almost similar. My mom was diagnosed with schizophrenia when I was 11 or 12, and it was kind of like she was never really there. And I just finished the audiobook recording of my memoir, and I realized the last sentence I wrote was, "And now the healing begins." And it was right after her death.
Yeah, it's so true. It's a different level of healing. So yeah, so you understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I think I know you know all about this, but I know for myself, I was in a long-term period of survival, of not fully grasping what it meant to lose a parent. And even now in my mid-30s is when I'm finally understanding it.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is having my niece and nephew who are now 5 and 7
Mm-hmm.
and realizing that I was their age and processing what that would be like, So it's a whole, I'm sure we could do a whole episode on this, but
But now
it's a journey.
but now it makes sense of how you ended up a clinical
Yeah.
psychologist, and especially dealing with attachment
Yes.
theories or styles, and kind of, I would assume, you kind of learning the process and your own therapy along the way.
Yes. And I watched my dad after losing my mom. I watched him really struggle in his relationships, as
Mhm.
anybody would. It was a really challenging time. And I watched him go through 3 different marriages.
Mhm.
And I experienced kind of the evil stepmother at one
Mm.
point.
Mhm.
So I saw a lot of turmoil and pain in romantic relationships. And then I went on to experience it myself in my 20s. And I was in my doctoral program and I found myself dating a narcissist for about
Mm.
a year and a half.
Mhm.
And I hit absolute rock bottom at the end of that relationship.
How did you get out of that one with a narcissist? Because I know it's very hard to break up with the mental abuse.
Yeah. Uh, for me, it was a spiritual moment.
Uh-huh.
So because I had gone back to him many times, we would break up,
Mhm.
get back together. I mean, I was in a near death scenario,
Uh,
and then I was filing a police report, and I was sitting in the lobby of my apartment building, and I was on the floor. I was in so much emotional pain talking to a police officer,
Mhm.
filing a report, and I had this out of body experience of looking down on me and going, this cannot be my life.
Mm.
And it was one of those moments of, okay, you can keep going down this path. You probably won't be alive. It's not a good path. Or you can decide to heal. And I'm so incredibly grateful I decided to heal. And in that moment, I couldn't even decide it for myself. But the researcher in me said, even if I can't have healthy relationships, I want to know how to do it. So
Mhm.
I'm going to figure it out so at least I could understand it and help other people. But I didn't even believe it was possible for myself. But just that curiosity of, I want to figure this out saved me in that moment.
Wow, I love that. I think that a lot of people, and I hear that a lot, of it was some higher power, some voice has told me, you have to change your life. You're not going to be able to survive like this. And I had that moment too. And it's trusting your gut and your intuition when you hear that
Hmm.
voice telling you you have to change, and having the courage to actually change,
Hmm.
which is hard
Hmm.
and scary because you're so comfortable going in the patterns.
Exactly. And you and I know it was not a year-long process. This
Mm.
is like a decade
And now the healing
long.
begins.
Yeah.
Still
It's still in
till
process,
yes.
but the decision to heal and to continue to go down that path, I mean, it's the thing that now has led me to an incredible relationship. Three
Mhm,
3 years with the most loving, supportive, kind, secure human.
mhm.
And I've helped over 600 women heal and become securely attached, people who thought that they could never have healthy relationships.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, all of my friends who are single are going to be listening to this because
love it.
it's so hard, especially if you have this childhood trauma, or some people are like, "I didn't have any childhood trauma," but they don't realize that they actually maybe had, like, little tiny T's.
Yep. Relational trauma,
Uh-huh.
little T's. Yep.
Yeah, and I wanna talk about something we've never talked on the podcast, which is, I mentioned it earlier, the attachment styles.
Love
So
it.
yes. So secure attachment, anxious, avoidant, dismissive, and disorganized. I did take my online test this morning to figure out what I was. It said my attachment style is secure attachment,
Beautiful.
which I was like, wow, I done a lot of freaking work if that's my attachment.
I love this. And this is my favorite topic. I nerd out on this. And I think people realizing that you can have different styles.
Mhm,
You can have one that you're spending most of your time in.
mhm,
And then let's say you have a terrible day at work or some triggers come up, then maybe you might revert to one of your old attachment styles.
Okay.
So really using it as a guide, not trying to put yourself just in one
Right.
bucket.
I
And
was just having a good morning then.
no, but hey, I think it speaks a lot to where you are, and to say, you know what, 95% of the time I'm hanging out in secure attachment. That's great. That says a lot about how much work you've done.
Can you go through and explain each one?
I would love to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll start with anxious attachment.
Mhm.
This is the classic style where you have fear of abandonment is at the root. And with anxious attachment, a lot of times you're devaluing yourself and overvaluing others. So you might put people on a pedestal.
Mhm.
You really struggle with direct, assertive communication. There's a lot of passive communication. This is the classic doormat, people pleasers. And these people are also susceptible to codependency
Mhm.
because you can find yourself becoming a chameleon to whatever relationship you're in. And then another piece with anxious attachment is the constant need for reassurance. So this is if you're dating, you might be the one that's texting 17 times,
Mhm.
looking at the phone, waiting for the response, counting the minutes, right? You have a real high need for reassurance. And then the hard thing for people with anxious attachment is even when they get the reassurance, they can't really internalize it very well. I say it's like your reassurance bucket has holes in it.
Yeah. They just don't believe in themselves enough or something like that. They just don't trust.
They're not trusting.
Yeah.
Exactly. They're not trusting their relationship. And that fear of abandonment is so strong that no matter, I can say, I love you, you're amazing, I'm so happy to be in this relationship, but they can't really register it.
Right. Right. Okay. So what's next here?
Yeah. Let's talk about avoidant attachment. So avoidant attachment is kind of the opposite of anxious attachment. This is someone who learned hyper independence as a coping skill. And they can oftentimes overvalue themselves and devalue others. Do you have any of those friends that are like, there's just nobody good enough out there? Nobody meets my standards.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that can be a hyper independence.
Yeah. I also have someone with anxious attachment that came to mind.
Yeah, we all
Exactly
know.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And with avoidant attachment, I think it's so important because these people sometimes get labeled as narcissists and they're not. There's a real fear of intimacy. There's a real fear of depending on others. And at the core of avoidant attachment, they're also not connected to their inner emotional experience. So they have a really hard time connecting to other people's.
Okay.
So closeness and being intimate with someone is really scary. If you think about it, they can't really connect to their own inner experience. How can they connect to someone else's? And this person, you might go on a date with them. You have an amazing time. You feel like, wow, we have such a great connection. And then you don't hear from them for 10 days. So they're pulling away. They're doing the distancing, conflict, stonewalling, right? Pulling away, not being able to work through conflict. They really have a low tolerance for feeling emotions and working through things.
So example, let's say I had a friend who was dating someone, definitely like some love bomb in there. And mind you, they were on an app to date. And, they were hanging out 3 weeks. It was pretty consistent and great time. He really was like thinking like she's great. And then he disappears for like after 3 weeks, like a week. And so like what, and and then later comes back and says, I'm just not ready to date. I was like, why the hell is he on a dating app?
Classic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could absolutely be avoidant attachment. And one of the characteristics too is deep down, they believe that they're not good partners, that they can't show up and be, that classic, it's not you, it's me. There's a lot of avoidant attachment there because there's this belief that I can't show up and be a good partner for you.
And do you think that's just a belief, or do you think it's the truth and that they have a lot of work to do to be able to trust yourself, do the work, believe in yourself, love yourself so that you can love someone else?
There's that's such a good question, right? It's the belief, but it's also the behaviors and the lack of emotional, the ability to connect to their emotions and to hold space for a partner.
Mhm.
So it's both. It's
Is that something that comes from childhood?
yes.
Like, what would their childhood be like?
So with avoidant attachment, a lot of times what happened is childhood neglect. They
Mhm,
didn't have a parent that was attuned to their needs. So they never had a model
mhm,
for, oh, this is how you show up for someone. This is how you validate emotions. This is how you support someone. And they simply learn to shut off their
mhm,
emotional selves. So if as a baby, if I'm crying and crying and crying and no one's coming, I just learn, okay, I'm not going to cry. Just shut that off.
mhm,
So they just develop this hyper independence and fear of intimacy. And also, I can't depend on people because they won't be there for me.
mhm. So, way to heal from that would be therapy.
There's a lot.
There's a
Well,
lot okay.
let's dive into that for sure. I know I want to talk about disorganized attachment
Yes.
as well. So, and disorganized attachment is only about 5% of the population,
Okay.
but this is the style that is highly associated with childhood trauma.
Mhm.
And this is where you're kind of pendulum swinging between anxious and avoidant.
Okay.
So you could find yourself 1 minute really pulling away, more of that avoidant attachment. And then the next day it's fear of abandonment. Please don't leave me. I love you. Right. And this is a very painful and chaotic attachment style for people. And this was also what I experienced for a long time.
Mhm.
So I myself know just how exhausting it is.
Yeah, I've been with Bobby for many, like 13 years or something, but prior to that, I was in a relationship for a year that was very, like, push-pull almost,
Yeah.
and, almost abusive in a way, but then, like
Yes.
that kind of roller coaster.
The in and out
Yeah.
dynamic.
Is that, would you say, a characteristic of, who you dated who ended up being a narcissist?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And here's the thing with disorganized attachment style, those people are typically attracted to each other.
Mhm.
It's a I
Oh.
like people to understand that this is a felt thing in your nervous system,
Mhm.
how you show up. So it's not as if you're going around saying, "Oh, I want to date the avoidantly attached people. Let me date them."
Mhm.
No, your nervous system has a felt sense of, "Wow, I'm really drawn to these people."
Mhm.
So, anxious is attracted to avoidant,
Mhm.
and disorganized is usually attracted to disorganized, which I think in popular terms is called trauma bonding.
Mhm.
That's a lot of times is two disorganized
Yeah.
people in a relationship.
Yeah. It's chaos.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
And so then secure attachment.
I love talking about secure attachment.
Yeah.
So, with secure attachment, you value the relationship with yourself and you value the relationship with your partner,
Mhm.
and you're able to have clear boundaries, open, honest, direct communication. Relationships feel good.
Mhm.
They add value to your life. You value your relationships
Mhm.
and you value yourself and your own needs. This beautiful term interdependence.
Mhm.
Have you heard that used?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's essentially where I say, "Well, hey, I can take care of myself. I know that I can self-soothe, but I know I can also go to you and I can ask for support."
Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing. And I definitely in the past have had other attachment styles. Even and I notice it in how I've attracted maybe some friends that,
Mhm.
are no longer in my life, or maybe I was used to chaos and had to learn, I'm done with chaos in my life. Growing up with my mother with her mental illness, it was just chaos. So chaos becomes this safety net to me. It seems normal.
Mhm.
And I had to work through that, like, chaos and my mother was also, later in life diagnosed with NPD when we were going to see a psychologist together and then separate. And I was like,
Mm,
wow, now a lot more makes
it
sense.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, schizophrenic, depression,
Wow.
NPD,
Yeah.
lots going on there.
Yeah,
But
and then that becomes your emotional home and what
yeah,
you feel drawn to in relationships, and then you have to get to that place that you mentioned of, "Okay, I'm not attracted to chaos
yeah,
anymore."
yeah. And then that's where educating and practicing boundaries came in. And
Yes.
a lot of people don't like boundaries.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true, and I think one thing that doesn't get talked about enough, which I'm sure you can relate to, is as you're healing and you're choosing the healthy relationships,
Hmm.
there's part of you that goes, "This is kind of boring. Like, do I like this person? Is there something wrong here?"
Yeah.
And we have to really intentionally go, "Okay, my brain is learning to associate relationships with stability,
Hmm.
love, support, predictability,
Hmm.
calm.
Yeah.
You're learning a new way of thinking about relationships, a new blueprint. And if you're not careful, you can kind of sabotage it.
Yeah. I can see that. So, with the attachment styles, if someone's finding them in, I don't know, avoidant, like what would the first step be to kind of heal?
Well, I'm glad they're listening to this podcast
Yes.
because it's awareness with anything. Isn't that the first step? It's
Hmm.
really being aware. I do have a quiz, so I'll give that
Okay.
for you. We can put the link in the show
Yes,
notes.
we'll put it there.
Yeah. So really just becoming aware of your attachment style. And it's not to be critical of yourself.
Right.
It's not to be judgmental. It's so that we can have understanding and compassion.
Yeah. Because then it's the awareness that then you're like, you can catch yourself. Like when I started catching myself in certain relationships, I'm like, there's that pattern again. I,
Yes.
and yeah. So, we all have gone through trauma in our life and
Yes.
we all have the work to do and the healing to do. So, yeah, it's nothing, no judgment on, but I think it's
Yes.
so important to um, catch those habits.
It is, yeah, and then really using that compassion and what I do with my clients, and I think some people skip this step, but this is so important, is we have to look at your past relationships
Mhm.
and look at the dynamics and look at the attachment style dynamics. So I take all my clients through something called a relationship inventory,
Mhm.
and we look at all the significant relationships and we understand, oh, how did you form this attachment style? How did you get to where you are? Because then it just gives you so much compassion once again. And then you can start to release it
Mhm.
and start to move towards secure.
Yeah. Definitely when you become more aware, you're like, I don't know if this person in my life is actually good for me. And it's
Yeah.
very hard to end a friendship, especially of many, many years. But then if you're listening and you're like, it's too hard to end this, I'm in deep. Once you do, you'll feel so much lighter.
Absolutely.
And like it's there's been a couple recently and people around me are like, you're so much lighter. I was like, and I didn't notice it, but then, I did notice it. Like, you're right. And I'm a lot less stressed out. So,
So good.
yeah.
There's that fear,
Yeah.
yeah, of, wow, maybe you've invested a lot of time
Yeah.
in the relationship and you go, "Oh my gosh, I don't wanna lose this person." But really, if it is not adding value to your life and you're feeling yourself maybe showing up in old patterns, you have to let go of that relationship to clear I always think about clear
Yeah.
the space in your life to allow the relationships you want to come in and but before you know it, those really healthy, secure relationships come in, whether it's friendships, work,
Yeah.
romantic partner.
So you talk about the ingredients of a healthy relationship. So let's talk about that. So people can become aware and have their little ingredient list.
I love this. I think that I always think about how so many of us grew up watching Disney movies,
Oh yeah.
like the
With
fairy tale.
and and I'll cuss on this because it's like people always say Disney fucked us. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
And there's this idea that somebody is just going to magically swing in one day and they're going to be your perfect
Yeah.
person. But one of the things I want people to know is that a relationship can't give you anything that you can't give yourself.
Mhm. Mhm.
So if I'm waiting for a relationship to come in and I go, okay, then once I have someone, I'll be loved.
Mhm.
That's not going to work. A real healthy relationship is simply a multiplier
Yeah.
of love in your life. It doesn't fill a void.
Mhm.
So I think that's one of the key ingredients is knowing that at your core,
Yeah.
that relationship with you is always going to come first.
I can compare that to where I guess maybe it popped in my head. People think that if you have more money, you'll be happy.
Right.
But it goes back to loving yourself. There is no money, no other person, nothing that will make you happy. And
Yeah.
we have to like really believe that. And I do believe that anyone can learn to love themselves as well.
It's so true. It's the foundation for
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
For anything, whether, yeah, it's in business or a relationship. It's so true. And then I think one of the other foundational ingredients is building secure attachment.
Mhm.
It is the foundation for a healthy relationship.
Mhm.
And a lot of people, they don't like to hear this, but you have to build it slowly.
Yeah.
Like in order to build a healthy long-term relationship, it's a slow build.
Like how slow?
Yeah. You're not talking about marriage on the third date. I will tell you that. I teach my clients to be a love scientist, to
Okay.
learn how to gather the data in
Mhm.
a relationship. So you're asking yourself, how do I feel in their presence? Am I able to set boundaries? Am
Mhm.
I able to express my needs? And you want to slowly build with someone where you go, wow, I am more of my authentic self in their presence.
So let's talk. Say you're just dating someone, a few weeks, maybe a month. And, a lot of times in the beginning, it's just like you give it your all and you're just so happy that you want to spend every moment. But do you think it's important to set boundaries from the beginning of dating, even if you want to just be with them every second of the day?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
what do we do here?
So, yeah, you want to pace the relationship slowly, and you want to I always talk about relationships have a culture, just
Mhm.
like any company has a culture. Every relationship has a culture. So you want the standards, the norms, the boundaries to begin to be built from day one.
Mhm.
So, one of the things that I love to say is that boundaries are hot. Right? Like they really are.
Yeah.
And if I want to be able to set boundaries in a long-term relationship with someone, I need to be able to do it early on in dating.
Mhm.
So for example, if you have that Thursday night yoga class that you always go to with your girlfriends and the person comes along and they want to take you out Thursday night, you get to say, "Hey, I would love to, but I have plans."
But what if then they say, "No, we're dating. Why would you dump me for your girlfriends?"
Ooh,
Ooh,
it's a strong yellow, maybe a red flag.
yeah.
Because we want people that respect our boundaries.
Yeah.
We do. And if they don't respect your boundaries, then they're not meant to grow with you.
Yeah. That's definitely something where I've seen a lot of friends, giving up what they love to do. "Oh, no, I can't because 'cause I'm having dinner, or we're doing this and his work party," and they stop hanging out and stop going to Pilates
Oh yeah.
so that's definitely I wanted to point that out too, like that yellow flag of, I think when I was younger, I would just be like, "Okay."
Oh yeah. Oh, me too.
Yeah.
And then if they were into golf, I was buying all the golf gear and buying the outfits and.
Being a chameleon.
Oh
Yeah.
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 One boyfriend I had was like into death metal and I
You're like,
remember.
"I love death
Oh, yeah, I
metal."
went to Metallica concerts, I wore these, like, black outfits and, the eyeliner, and it's like, what was I doing? But I was trying not to be abandoned in those
Mm.
moments,
Mm.
right? And, we have that false belief that if I become like this person, they can't abandon me.
So what happened to that relationship?
Oh, resentment built, cheating on both sides, just
Mm.
a dumpster fire.
Yeah.
Like codependence and being a chameleon does not work long term.
Yeah. And then how long I wanna hear more of your dating stories
Oh, I
now.
have so many. I've told myself I need to write a book that is just
Yeah.
about my dating stories. I have so many, and they are dramatic.
But with each one, did you learn a lesson? And you're like, "I'm not doing that again," or, "I just realized I was trauma
No, I wish
bonding."
I could tell you yes, but no. I mean,
No.
it really wasn't until I hit that rock bottom moment
Yeah.
that I stopped doing anything differently because like so many people, I would go, "Oh, it's a new person. This time it's going to be different." And
Yeah.
it wasn't.
Yeah. Dang. Alright, so healthy dating strategies, like
Yeah.
more of the ingredients for that,
Absolutely.
the
I
boundaries.
know we talked about going slow, which is so huge. So really being able to do that, learning how to regulate your emotions. I know you get this.
Yeah.
So many of us have outsourced that to other
Uh-huh.
people. So we
Mhm.
want other people to do that work for us. If I'm feeling off, I'll, text somebody or I want the text from the person I'm dating.
Mhm.
But I want to encourage everyone that you have to learn how to self-soothe and regulate your own emotions. It's such a key step.
So, what are some tips on that? Someone's like, "What does self-soothe mean? What do I do? How do I know, the signs of me starting to get worked up?"
Yeah, one of the things I love is prevention for this. So how to really take care of yourself, fill up your own cup first,
Mhm.
having non-negotiable morning routines.
Mhm.
Doesn't have to be an hour long, but something that you do to ground yourself and take care of yourself. And then I love mindfulness self-compassion,
Mhm.
using that as a meditation. Have you heard of this?
What is that?
Dr. Kristen Neff
Okay.
is the founder of this out of UT Austin.
Okay.
And she teaches it's like a 5-minute process, and you're able to connect to how you're feeling, learn how to really validate it as your ideal parent, essentially, and then being able to ask, what do I need? What do I need to feel better supported?
Mhm.
And letting yourself give the answer.
Yeah.
I think so many of us, we don't tune in. We don't have self-trust. We haven't even tuned in. So we don't even know what we need.
Yeah. That reminds me of, through Chopra, when I trained, like, one of the beginning of the meditations are these 4 soul questions, and you're not supposed to have the answer. You answer it yourself as you do it over and over daily. And it's like, what am I grateful for? What is my purpose? Um, what I'm like, what are the other 2? I haven't done it
It
in a
sounds
while.
good though.
Sounds good. It's in the toner of app. I have one. But yeah, it's the 4 soul questions where you just eventually you're like, oh, my purpose just came to me. Oh, this is what I'm grateful for. I love that. And morning routines, I think, are so important. And many of us get thrown off schedule all the time. As
Yeah.
me, for example, I'm in the middle of resetting my morning routine. So I was just traveling constantly for
Mhm.
months. And I was like, I have no routine. So I am keeping track in my kitchen on a little whiteboard, and I'm on day 10 of 21 because 21 days creates a habit.
Love it.
Because I'm in town for 21 days at home. So I am day 10 of waking up, putting my sneakers on right away, doing a little meditation, working out, and not, it doesn't. I'm not like doing hit workouts and running a half marathon. Just like something
Yeah,
20 to
movement.
movement, 20 to 40 minutes, some weights, some yoga, and then I love cold and hot therapy too. Just really boosts my mood. So,
So good.
but yeah, day 10.
And
Check.
here's what I love. It's not so much about what you do. Obviously, you do have to find what works for you.
Yeah.
It's teaching your brain, I deserve to take care of me first.
Yeah.
And what that does is it increases your self-worth.
Yes. And then you start to crave it. Like,
Yes.
I'm looking forward to waking up in the morning and moving my body and doing a little meditation, something simple. And it really improves your mental health. It really does.
It does. And when we are able to have a calm nervous system, when we've taken care of ourselves, guess what? That's when you can approach your partner in a securely attached way.
Mhm.
There's so many relationships where there's conflicts, there's issues, and I think a lot of it is because you haven't moved yourself to secure.
Mhm.
You want to learn how to move yourself to as securely attached as possible and then go to your partner.
Yeah.
Oh man, it just makes things so much easier.
Yeah. What is conscious coupling?
So, conscious coupling is this decision to intentionally build a relationship in
Mhm.
a healthy, securely attached way, and where you have open, honest, direct communication with your partner. And there's more I can say too, but one of the big things is saying, what kind of relationship do we want?
Mhm.
I talked about relationship culture.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of relationship do we want? A lot of us don't want our parents' relationships.
Right.
So we have to intentionally say, what is it that we want to co-create together? So for example, even deciding, how do we want to celebrate?
Mhm.
What are the ways that we want to deeply connect with each other? How do we want to navigate conflict?
Yeah.
Like intentionally having a vision for what that looks like, and constantly being willing to have the conversations about it. It's not like you just have this one 3-hour talk and then
Yeah.
you have the vision. This is an ongoing process, right? Of what are we co-creating intentionally together?
Right. Like maybe creating the plan and then checking in once a month with each other?
Yeah, my partner and I, we check in once a week.
Once a week. Okay.
We just have our morning coffee
Mhm.
together on Thursdays, and we're checking in about, okay, what went well, what do we want to work on from the past week, and then we're also looking at the week coming up, and we're saying, okay, how can I support you in
Yeah.
this week coming up?
I love that. Bobby and I said we were gonna do that. I think we did it one Sunday. We're gonna get back on that. I don't, that's really good, and it is important it helps you communicate because then we just, like, go, 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 and we're not
Yeah,
communicating, and then there might be resentment or miscommunication, and I feel like even if someone's listening and they're like, "Conscious coupling, that sounds like a lot." I feel like I'm gonna get in an argument with my partner. I almost envision that you could go to a coach or a therapist for a session of conscious coupling and, like, make these decisions with a third party, a neutral third party too.
absolutely. One of the best things that I do for couples that I've helped is teaching them a framework for conflict.
Mhm.
To have a framework, it's called dialogue. And essentially, you go, okay, we have this structure. We know how to navigate conflict. We have a guide. We learn frameworks for so many things, but not many of us learn how to actually navigate conflict in a healthy way. And it's just incredibly helpful to have a guide.
Yeah. It is true. Even if you are a conscious couple, and then say something trauma hits, you
Mhm.
lose a friend, you lose a parent, and the relationship is a little bit shook because maybe the partner doesn't know how to go about their other partner's grief. Uh, what is your advice on?
I
Like,
love that. I love that you bring that up.
yep,
That's life.
yeah,
And there's no perfect relationship. A securely attached, conscious couple is not perfect.
mhm,
I want to make that clear. I think what's really great about building secure attachment and really healthy communication strategies
mhm,
is it will help you navigate those times in a way where hopefully you can have repair, you can have support, and hopefully you can move back to baseline a bit more quickly.
mhm,
But there's still going to be times where we're human and things are off. And it's really about when you have secure attachment, you have that empathy and compassion for your partner, and you know, we're going to work through this. We're going
yeah,
to make it work. We're going to figure it out. My boyfriend and I, we moved from Montana, no, yeah, to Montana to Florida, Florida back to Montana, had some health things come up, job changes, like all we think we had
all the
like
things.
9 out of the 12 most stressful things you can experience in a relationship in
Yeah,
like 1 year.
yeah,
And we said our tagline was, "We'll figure it out."
mhm,
And that's the beauty of secure attachment and healthy relationships. It's not that you won't have stressors or pain, but it's that you know, "Hey, I have a teammate that is on my side,
yeah,
that we're facing the problem together. They're not, trying to tear me down, but we're facing it together, and we're gonna figure it out."
yeah. I love that because when when shit hits the fan, a lot of what attachment style would be the one that's just going to run away and avoidant.
Avoidant attachment.
Got it.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
going to Mexico.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to shift a little bit here because I know you wanted to talk about a really tough subject, which is losing a loved one by suicide. And I saw that you wanted to talk about it, and I'm very open to that because I think it's really important in today's just society. I feel like everyone I know has lost a loved one by suicide,
Mhm.
and it's a hard conversation. But I've had a few guests on here that have lost siblings, husband, and it is the most listened to podcast.
Mm.
So people want to talk about this, and I think even more so how to have compassion for someone who's lost a loved one or even for yourself and the guilt that could
Mhm.
carry.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't really talked about it very publicly, but I knew that you would be the person to talk to about it just because of the way that you show up for mental health, and you're such an advocate. So thank you for
Yeah.
being that person. I was my best friend, also a clinical psychologist. We went to grad school together, and we did everything together. And he was my gay best friend. I hit on him and then realized that he was in a relationship. So, but from that day on, like once I realized I couldn't date him, we just became best friends, and we did everything together. And I mean, he was a top researcher at Stanford University. Very, very professionally, well known. And this was somebody who was a straight A student, and everyone loved him, and he had the biggest heart. And I think what was hard for me is watching him go through the relationship that he was in. He was in a relationship that was unhealthy, and it was 9 years of him being in this relationship and trying to help him get out of it, and he couldn't, for whatever reason. And then when the pandemic hit, he was even more isolated
with the person.
So it was just him and his partner. And yeah, I mean, it was I can honestly say, even, yeah, just the most challenging thing I've ever been through in my life, getting that call from his mom. And I had tried, I knew that something was off for probably about 6 months. And there was all kinds of interventions that we tried, and I tried talking to him, and his parents even flew out and, tried to intervene in some way. But he was really good at putting on a facade, and he didn't get the help he needed. And this was someone who was a psychologist, who's surrounded by other psychologists at Stanford University.
But not necessarily the signs of suicidal ideation were not there.
No.
Yeah.
I remember one time, like years and years before this happened, he had just talked about being depressed. And I remember being so thrown off by him even mentioning that.
Yeah.
Because he did not present that way in any way. And yeah, it's been the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life. Of, you have those moments of, I was living in Montana, and like I would have driven to San Francisco and beat his door down. I would have done anything. But it's certainly just brought a lot of empathy for me, for anybody struggling with mental health. And then honestly, it's really motivated me to help people with their relationships.
Yeah.
Because I know that was part of it for him, was just his relationship. So it's been a huge motivator for me to like help more people have healthy relationships.
And that's beautiful that you're saving lives by doing that and dedicated to him. And anyone out there, maybe, well, number one, I want to point out too, because before I go there, when you lose someone, a loved one by suicide, just knowing that it's not your fault I think
Yes.
there's a lot of guilt in there. Like, what could I have done? What did I miss? But, everyone I've talked to, it's like there were no signs.
Yeah. And I have my days where, I mean, I would honestly say for the first 2 years, I woke up with guilt every day.
Yeah.
And I think that's just normal. But it's less common now,
Yeah.
but I still have my days. And I think just knowing that that's part of the process.
Yeah. Oh, that is such a heavy topic. And I love that what if someone's listening and they're like, I think I really do need to get out of this relationship because it's not good for my mental health and it's not getting better. And I know it's not going to get better, but I keep going back and I've had perhaps suicidal thoughts and
Mhm.
this is dangerous. What do I do?
I think it's that realization that your mental health and your well-being is just the absolute most important thing. And no matter how much you're telling yourself, "Oh, I'll never find anyone else," or, "Oh, they're not going to be okay without me." You're telling yourself that, "Oh, they need you."
Mhm.
No matter how much you're trying to convince yourself that you have to stay, you don't. And you deserve to heal and you deserve to be in relationships that are good for your mental health, that add
Mhm.
value to your life, and that is available to you. So you're never stuck, and get help. Don't be isolated. Reach out,
Mhm.
whether it's trusted friends, a therapist, get all the support you can and get out.
Yes, I hope whoever's listening needs to hear that, gets out and reaches out. And you are worthy of a loving, secure relationship. And I know myself, like you, we've been in those like, oh, I'll never love again.
Yeah.
I'll never be lovable again. I've spent so many years with this person. How can anyone get to know me again?
Mhm.
But it happens.
It happens, and you go, wow, you have these things that are called corrective emotional experiences.
Mhm.
And being in these healthy relationships after being in toxic ones, it just makes you that much more grateful. Like
Yeah.
the gratitude. I wake up every day in so much gratitude for the people I have in my life
Yeah.
because I know what it was like before. I
Yeah.
know how painful it was in the past.
Yeah. And then what if someone listening has had thoughts that maybe their friend is in a bad relationship and it could be bad for their mental health? What should they do?
That's a really tough
I
one.
know.
It's a really tough one because you don't want to enable. I think every situation is different, but the basic thing is to express your concern in a really direct, open, and honest way, and say something like, "Hey, I really care about you, and I have to be honest with you. I'm really worried about you. I'm worried about your mental health. This is where I'm at, and I really feel like you would benefit from support." So don't swing in and try to be their therapist and or
Yeah.
their social worker. Don't do that, but let them know how you feel and let them know that you think that they really would benefit from support, and just keep encouraging them to get support. And then if you have to set boundaries
Mhm.
on the friendship. My best friend was living with me when I was dating the narcissist.
Mhm.
She had to move out of our apartment. She could not enable it. She couldn't witness it. And I love her for that. And we are
Yeah.
still friends today.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
You can't enable it.
Yeah. I think what you said about don't be their therapist, don't tell them you should do this or you should. I think it's really important just letting someone know, hey, I'm here for you. Like, how are you feeling? Checking in because they know. Maybe even getting someone to talk. They have the answers.
They do. They know. They know. They just need the support. And sometimes they have to gather a little bit more data, as I
Mhm.
say. They just have to learn it a little bit more. But you have to trust people to make their decisions while also letting them know that they're supported. You
Yeah.
want to do both.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Morgan, you have some amazing advice. And I know a lot of people who would want to hear more from you. Where can we find you? Do you have courses online, relationships or programs?
Yes, I do. And this has been such a good conversation. I feel like we could probably talk for 4 hours.
Yeah.
So, I mean, thank you so much for having me. And honestly, the best place to connect with me is on my podcast. It's called Let's Get Vulnerable. I know we're going to have you on. I
Yes.
can't wait.
Yes.
It's going to be so good. But there's over 450 episodes on attachment theory, relationships, communication, and it's a great resource.
Yeah.
And then I talk about the Empowered, Secure, Loved program that is for women who want to become securely attached.
Yeah.
All that is mentioned in the podcast as well.
I think that is such a good thing, just learning how to become securely attached and very important for your own joy in life.
It changes every area of your life. Obviously, I help people, their relationships, but a lot of my clients, they'll like double their income or start a new business or have great friendships. And I just love how secure attachment really changes everything.
Yeah. All right. And we'll put everything in the show notes too. And thank you for coming on The Big Silence.
Thank you for having me.
The Big Silence. The Big Silence.